My name is Dr. G. Welcome to That's Unusual, my podcast uncovering the unusual stories behind the world's most interesting people. On this show, we celebrate what makes us different and how we convert those differences into unexpected opportunities. Shh. Listen. Do you hear that sound? It's the sound of crickets. Welcome to this week's episode of That's Unusual. For most of us, the sound of crickets chirping conjures up memories of calm summer nights by the campfire. For Leslie Ziegler, that same noise is the sound of an untapped business opportunity to allow her to both do good and do well at the same time. As the co-founder of Biddy Foods, Leslie is making headlines by using crickets as a source of healthy, sustainable foods. While this may sound disgusting on first blush, as it certainly did for me, what few realize is that crickets, and many other insects for that matter, is a common source of nutrition in many other parts of the world. I'm not talking about eating crickets whole, although many folks do prefer it that way, but rather crickets ground up into flour that can be used for baking various treats. So why isn't it a staple food source in the United States? I dig into this question and many others in my conversation with Leslie today. We uncover how she stumbled upon this unusual opportunity, explore the health and environmental benefits of eating crickets, and the question we are all wondering, what does it taste like? Well, I couldn't do this interview without first giving it a try for myself. So I went out and bought a bag of Biddy Foods' signature product, the cricket flour. I baked up some chocolate chip cookies and did the ultimate taste test. I had my kids taste it and see if they noticed any difference. And you know what? To my surprise, they loved it. And I must say, so did I. I'm so confident you will love it too that we are offering a special listener-only discount for you to try it for yourself. Go to biddyfoods.com, that's BITTYFOODS.com, and enter the code UNUSUAL20 to receive a special one-time discount just for my guests. That's code UNUSUAL20. Trust me, it will be an experience and a story you will love to tell. So go to the website and go buy up some yummy cricket-based goodies. You can thank me for it later. As you listen to this episode, I ask that you reflect on your own unusual stories and unique qualities that can help open doors to unexpected opportunities. And if you haven't done so yet, please go and subscribe to my podcast via your favorite listener platform, whether it be iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher. And while you're there, please leave me a review. And so with that, let's get started. Welcome to the show, Leslie. Great to have you on.
Thank you very much. Good morning.
Good morning to you. So let's talk crickets today. So you are the co-founder of Biddy Foods, which is really such a cool endeavor. And we're going to talk all about crickets and what you're up to with Biddy Foods. But, quite honestly, I have to understand how you got up to this point. So I know you've got, having done some reading on you and having known you for some time, you've been involved with advertising to education, to even, helping co-found a health tech incubator, Rock Health, to now food and beverage. Perhaps just give us a snapshot of you and how you got to this point in your journey.
Yeah, it's certainly been a circuitous one. Number one, I'm a very curious person. And apparently a glutton for punishment because all I do is work in regulated industries. So, I started my career in advertising as a designer, art director, kind of moved on from that because I was really interested in, being part of a smaller team. I think advertising teaches you so much about how to sell and how to market yourself. Mm-hmm. But in the end, I really wanted to, do something that allowed me to have kind of more hands-on impact. So, I joined a small startup and was part of that in its, brief time on this earth, but, helped raise a lot of money there. And around the same time, actually, I was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis, which for me was a, pretty big hit because anyone who knows me will tell you, I love food. I love to eat. I love to cook. I love to host dinner parties. It's one of my very favorite things. And in that moment, I was told, my entire life would have to change. And I thought that sucked. Mm-hmm. So I've never been a patient before, really. So during this period of time, Rock Health came to life, and I, was working with all these health startups, turned myself into a human science experiment for about a year, self-tracked everything, did a lot of data gathering, donated it to all of the startups, whoever wanted it, because a lot of them were doing things kind of based on...
What did you learn from tracking yourself for a year?
Well, that's the thing, is that it's food. It mattered somewhat, how much I exercised, how much stress I had in my life, what kind of, travel schedule I was following. But in the end, the single biggest trigger that made me feel good or bad was what I was eating. And so that is when I said, aha, well, there's not a whole lot of interesting stuff going on in food, actually. Like, there are not necessarily, what we saw at Rock Health 6 years ago was that, there weren't a lot of people going into digital health because it was hard, because they perceived that it was, their regulatory challenges, their, bureaucratic challenges and institutional challenges. There wasn't a lot of money going into it. And actually, I think food is kind of in the same spot. And so, I left Rock Health. I was working with some healthcare companies and kind of trying to decide what was next. And in that time, my now co-founder, Megan, we were friends, and we went to dinner one night after she had returned from Cambodia and some other Southeastern Asian countries. And, she said, man, I've really been, I eat all these delicious insects, and I read this UN report, and man, I think insects might be ready to hit the Western world. What do you think? And I said, well, yeah, I mean, it's good math, certainly, if you look at the sustainability benefits and nutritional benefits. And so, yeah, it sounds like a great idea. And she's like, I think I'm going to cook some stuff. And I was like, sweet, what are you doing tomorrow? Let's make some stuff. Let's do this. And so that's really how Biddy was born, was, in Megan's kitchen. And we experimented with lots of different insects. As you can imagine, we had some experiences with Vitamixes and, roasting and trying to, grind things up. And there are some really funny videos running around somewhere. But, in the end, we settled on an invisible form factor for all intents and purposes to, incorporate crickets, which we think have a good brand. You think of chirping and warm summer nights and all that stuff.
So when you guys got together and started scheming up some meals and recipes around it, I mean, what was going through your head at this point? Had you tried insects before, and specifically crickets before? And how did you come up with these new recipes?
Yeah, I had grasshopper tacos at, Oaxacan Mexican restaurants. Actually, when I was really young, I think I was 12 or 13, I had a friend from Argentina, and he brought back chocolate-covered crickets from a trip and didn't tell me what they were. And I tried them, and I said, wow, this is really good. What is this anyway? And he said, well, they're chocolate-covered crickets. I was like, that's great. So, I think I've always had an adventurous palate. I don't think that, I don't get grossed out. My whole thinking on food is, if you try it once and you don't like it, then you get to not like it. But if you don't ever try it, you don't get an opinion. It's like voting, right? I think I am a bit more adventurous than most, but it was not weird to me at all. 80% of the world already eats insects. It's just, the West, we have some stigmas and mental brain blocks. The visual barrier is the main thing for most people. But no, I think it just makes a lot of sense.
So are you serving up the crickets in their true form, or you're looking at alternate ways of getting over that stigma by introducing it here in the West? Oh, we are definitely not serving them whole, although some people do. There are a couple companies that you can order them online and they'll ship you whole crickets. But no, it's like I was saying about this whole notion of a visual barrier. People just envision whole insects, and that's not appetizing to most people, at least in the US and in Europe. Although they are making their way onto plates, like they're served at Noma and Mugaritz and a number of 3 Michelin star restaurants in Europe. So it's become part of high cuisine already. But no, we actually treat them a lot like coffee. So the crickets are slow roasted. They're then milled and they become a very fine powder. So then we can just seamlessly incorporate it into, we have a patent pending flour formulation. So you can bake, muffins, and cookies, and quick breads, and things of that nature if you are a home cook. Or, our real flagship product at this point, we're making chips. So we have these chips, we call them churritos, which means chirp in Spanish. Mhm.
which we think is pretty
Good
cute.
name.
A little, yeah, yes, it's a lot of fun thinking about how to name everything because, we wanted to be subtle. So I would say, there are a couple of companies in the market. We're probably the most subtle about how we brand the, fact that there's cricket in the chips, because honestly, if you tried them, you would never know. They just taste like really delicious snack chips. So they're made in Mexican flavors, 3 flavors: salsa verde, baja ranchero, and spicy mole. And they're really tasty. They won 2 of the biggest food awards in the business last year, actually in 2016. And they're doing really well. We're in over 100 stores now.
Wow, that's just amazing growth and adoption there. On the website, you describe this as, we start with sustainably raised crickets, which are then slow roasted to bring out the nutty, toasted flavor, which to me is just an amazing description of it, because I would never think of crickets in that light. I mean, one of the big challenges you have here is you've got to go from, like you said, the stigma, the sort of niche industry of insects, at least in the Western world, and bring it to mainstream. What's your plan to do that? I mean, how do you go about doing that?
We found that the best possible way for people to, have their minds changed if they're at all hesitant is just to try it. And most people are willing to try it.
And how do you get them to try it?
We do demos in stores. I'm always packing a few bags everywhere I go. So, if I come across someone and they ask what I do and I explain it to them and they say, whoa, I let them try them. My Uber drivers try them, other passengers in Ubers occasionally. It's really fun. So I would say, for us, like, education is kind of the number one thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then, at the same time, we tell people why crickets make so much sense. And then we also talk to them about, the sustainability benefits, how wholesome they are. So, it really is kind of those 2 areas. They're really good for the planet and they're really good for people.
Yeah, so let's talk about that a little bit further, because I know, of course, you're conjuring up recipes that make it tasty and make it palatable for everyday consumption, but you also talk about some of the health as well as sustainability benefits. Can you tell us a little bit more about those 2?
Yeah, and really this kind of goes back to your first question, which is how on earth and why are you doing this? And every time someone asks, I say, well, because I like math. I think crickets are just good math, right? So, California, the company is in San Francisco, and here in California, we've experienced until very recently a pretty terrible drought. And, when you look at the main usage of water in California is agriculture, it's like 80%. Goes to agriculture. And in fact, 10% of the total goes to growing almonds. That's a lot of water. We grow most of the world's almonds actually at this point. So it's a major export for the state of California. But, it takes 1 gallon of water to make 1 almond. And it takes 1 gallon of water to make a whole pound of cricket protein. Wow. Which is, yeah. So, if you just look at that metric alone, it's pretty powerful. You look at land usage, compared to animal protein. Animal protein is next level. Cows, depending upon how they're raised, can be as many as 2,500 gallons of water per pound. And actually, cricket protein is much more efficient from a protein perspective than beef. So, it already takes all that water to grow 1 pound of beef. And it takes 18 months. It takes about 6 weeks to grow crickets. And crickets are about, 65% protein per pound. And beef is only 22 to 28%. So you're also getting technically like twice as much protein. So, once you think through all of that, it's like, okay, well, we've got this issue with animal protein. We've got these, this dependency. We have to start figuring out how to get protein into, the things that we eat every day already. So it's, snack foods, staple foods. And we have this great opportunity to turn, foods that are driven by flour, which really don't have a lot of nutritional benefit at the moment. We can now say, okay, well, cricket flour, 1 cup of cricket, just raw cricket powder is 70 grams of protein, 70. It's a lot. So think about, for those out there that have kids, I'm sure that you're not thrilled about making pancakes for them on Sunday morning, right? It's kind of like, oh, I know you like them, but, and if that's all they'll eat, they don't want meat, they don't want other things. How do you get protein into your kids' mouths? And we think that it's a really compelling idea to turn these things, a lot of our customers are moms and kids actually, which is, it's great. It's exactly what we wanted.
And is it enough protein of sort of your daily consumption that you should be having? Or is it, I mean, how much would you have to eat to achieve those numbers?
Well, I mean, daily protein consumption depending upon what you look at, and kids are obviously different, but it's about 50 grams. So you would, depending upon how many pancakes you eat, I mean, you could certainly knock out 20% of that just for making that one change, which is pretty cool.
And talk to me about price a little bit. Is there a price advantage or benefits to using cricket flour versus sort of other alternatives?
Right. So actually, our flour, the baking flour that we sell is all purpose. You can substitute cup for cup. And it is, if you look at people who make gluten-free blends, so it's also gluten-free. So we decided right out of the gate that we were going to really look at who we thought was going to be excited about this product from a baking perspective. Mm-hmm. And we did some research, and what we found was, people are spending a lot of money on gluten-free baking. So there are a lot of people with celiac disease or just, healthy people, paleo folks that want to avoid gluten as an ingredient. So we said, okay, the first thing that we will make is this gluten-free blend. And anyone who does gluten-free baking can tell you that an all-purpose gluten-free blend is very expensive. And if you do it yourself, you have to buy like 5 different ingredients because, almond flour on its own doesn't really, work quite the same way. You need xanthan gum, you need all kinds of different things. So, it is a little expensive right now. We are working to bring the price down on the flour, but actually our chips are priced just like any other chips. They're priced just like a Late July or, nice artisanal chip. They're not quite Doritos yet, but we'll get there eventually. But they also have a lot more health benefits than Doritos, obviously.
Mm-hmm. Now, of course, crickets are living beings, so to say. I mean, do you face the same regulatory challenges as, other types of animal products and how you handle crickets and so forth?
Not yet. So the FDA doesn't really recognize them as tiny livestock. They really recognize them more as like a grain. So basically, the rule is they have to be grown specifically for human consumption, which mm-hmm. means, fed a specific diet, grown in a certain way, away from other insects. So if you go into a cricket farm, which everyone expects to be very loud and is actually not. It's like a very low hum. It's like walking into a meadow at night. It's actually kind of relaxing and nice. And it's very clean too. It's we get a lot of questions actually about what is the cricket's life like, and what are cricket farms like, and how does it compare to animal protein? I really care about animal welfare, and like our answer to that always is that, well, if you care about animal welfare, then you should only eat crickets because I don't know if you've ever been to a chicken or any kind mm-hmm. of factory.
Well, I've seen some videos, yeah.
I mean, it's in person, it's next level. It's really pretty bad.
So do you have a physical plant, like a cricket farm that you?
Yeah, so we work with a number of different cricket farmers actually, and it looks like a warehouse. So you walk in, there are big tubs, and usually egg crate inside of the tubs. And that is how they're grown. They grow in these bins. They like to be warm. They like to be close to each other. And at the end of, the 5-6 week period where they grow, they're just put into a cold space and then they go to sleep because they're cold blooded. So that's how they are. They go to heaven that way.
All right. So I have to ask this question. So of all of the universe of insects, why crickets over other insects?
Well, so it's a good question. I kind of answered it a little bit before, but one thing is the brand, right? Crickets don't sound gross. Sounds kind of cute. There are other, cricket means obviously like it's a sport. It's also a wireless company. So it already is kind of part of our culture in a lot of ways. But most people do not think, ew, cricket's gross. They think, oh yeah, Jiminy cricket or chirping, warm summer nights, all of that. In addition, there's actually already a pretty big cricket farming industry, believe it or not, here in the US. So they're also, knowing there was that existing infrastructure made it a bit easier to get started.
So what other insects would be the equivalent to a cricket? I mean, if you were to sort of expand, the palette, so to say, of the types of insects that you utilize for your products, what other insects would you explore? I think the main one is actually mealworms. They're really tasty, and they have, a nutritional profile that's pretty close to crickets. It's just that people, when you say mealworms, they say, oh, worms,
Yeah,
Yeah,
they're actually a lot.
I'm glad you started off with crickets because that's certainly my reaction.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to. There's a long history in food of coming up with other names for the actual food product. So we don't say at the butcher counter, can you give me a pound of cow, right? We call it beef.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with pigs, pork. For some reason, chicken is immune from this. But if you look at the world of fish, Chilean sea bass actually was renamed because the actual animal is called the Patagonian toothfish. People were not buying it, so they figured out that we need something more palatable for people. We'll come up with another name; it'll be great, and that's what they did. So I think if we did go down the path of mealworms, we'd probably come up with some name that masked a bit what it was, but. They are really tasty, though. Insects in general just kind of taste like nuts. They have a nice natural nuttiness to them, especially after they're slow roasted.
So you and Megan have achieved a number of well-deserved awards for some of the work that you guys are doing with Biddy Foods. What in this journey of having started it, I know it's got to be a fun and unexpected journey of a lot of unknowns. What would you say are some of the interesting things that have arisen, whether it be in the form of challenges, lessons learned, funny experiences over the past couple of years and having started Biddy Foods?
I mean, the early days of putting mealworms in the Vitamix was a pretty funny period of time. I think I'm still, what's really amazing actually is that, when we started, the reaction to this was much more, wait, really? You're doing that? What are you doing? Wait, me? No, nah, why would I do that? And now then, we've been fortunate and we've had a lot of press and, that's really helpful in educating the public as well. But now generally, if you say, we make foods powered by cricket flour, and people say, oh, crickets, that's a lot of protein, right? And then you say, yes, it's so great that you know that. Really, for me, like the most fulfilling thing is knowing that, we have been a driver in educating people as to why this not just needs to happen, but is going to happen, and helping people have a really great first experience with insects. Because I think that that's in many ways the biggest challenge is, there are other companies out there doing things. Some of them make really delicious foods. Not all of them, though. And obviously there are home cooks who try to do it on their own, make their own flour formulations that don't work as well. In fact, I was talking to someone about this last night. He said, I had someone, bought this raw cricket powder and incorporated it into cupcakes. And it was already a bad recipe. And he was like, it was grainy, it was gross, I don't know. And I was like, well, you should, that's why we formulated it this way, because it makes it a whole lot easier for the home chef. So, and then we tried our chips and he said, wow, this is really good. So it was, so we got to change his mind. But I would say that's really the most kind of fulfilling thing is those interactions with people where, you do change their mind because, you make them see the math and then they try it and then they go, oh, okay, I get it. Done.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Now, you mentioned that you were in about 100 different retail outlets. What's, getting this into the hands of consumers, businesses? I mean, do you go direct to consumer? Do you sell off to restaurants? What kinds of outlets are you in? Are they specialty niches? Can you tell us where a lot of this can be obtained and where the interest is?
Well, if you want to find us in stores, we have a store locator on our website, which is biddyfoods.com. We are also now officially in Amazon with our chips. As of last week. Yeah, it's great.
Congratulations. That's great.
Well, it's not quite as simple as just listing it. Amazon has many different pathways and we really wanted to we're in a special program with them that allows us to do a lot more than a typical account. So if you have Prime and you want to try our chips, they're up there. We also still sell our cookies and flour on our website, which is also at biddyfoods.com. So we do direct to consumer, but what we found is, with this product, a lot of times it really helps for people to try it before they buy it, which is why we're excited to have retail partners. So we're in stores on the West Coast. We're in a lot of independents. We also just launched in Bristol Farms this weekend. So if you live in LA and you want to try them out, they're actually on special all month, which is pretty cool. And then we're also in East Coast stores. So we're in, the New York tri-state area all the way down through Virginia and Maryland. And we're in Mom's Organic Market. We're in Stop and Shop and Giant. for the most part. And then a couple
Good. So
independents.
nice diverse outlet.
Yeah. Well, we've been really excited. I mean, all of these are pretty mainstream markets.
Yeah.
So to your question about, whether it's niche or not, it's actually not. We're getting interest from lots and lots of very big retailers with thousands of stores. But the way it typically works is you get placed in, a set of pilot stores. Oh yeah, we're in Publix too. We just found out about that. Yeah. So it's really exciting.
A good broad distribution. That's really exciting. If somebody had to search on Amazon for it, what would they search for? Biddy Foods or Crickets?
Yeah, Biddy Foods, Churritos for sure. But Biddy Foods should get you there too.
Great. That's fantastic. So, I mean, you guys have done a phenomenal job to date, and this is a really exciting space. What's next for Biddy Foods? I mean, what do you see over the next couple of years for you guys?
I mean, besides world domination, I don't know. It's we're really excited to continue to roll out in more markets. We have a lot of interest, not just in the U.S. but other countries, and so hopefully we'll be in a couple of flagship locations across the globe, because we've shipped to over 30 countries actually, just on our website. So we're really excited about that potential too. But I think what's really exciting for us is the idea that this whole notion of eating insects is just going to be a normal part of everyday life. It's not going to be weird. It's not going to be niche. It's not going to be it's just going to be a normal thing eventually. We find actually with millennials, it's much less of a thing. Age-wise, kids love it. Millennials think it's really cool. And when you get older than that, that's where we tend to see more resistance. But, we're really excited about feeding kids and families.
But you've also, I think from what I understand, you've also had a lot of interest from the culinary world, right? Have you guys partnered with any, key chefs in the space to help spread the message and make it more mainstream?
Yeah, so we're actually working on that right now. We want to work with a few bakeries around the country and really focus on having like a pop-up, Biddy Foods, cricket flour, banana bread, or muffin or something in those locations. I mean, think cronut, but with crickets. So we're looking at that. And, obviously we get a lot of interest from chefs. We're also looking into, because our flour, so we're not just a finished goods company, we're also an ingredient company. So we've been approached by a lot of big players that have wanted to maybe use our flour to white label a product that they make, or, just get into food service, like at a university, for example. They're always looking for ways to improve the cafeteria. We're very interested in selling flour in bulk to those places. So it's a really, really interesting thing to get to do. So it's not just, we're selling into retail. We're also able to, sell high volumes of the flour to folks that would use it, in their own kitchens and in university settings, maybe even schools eventually. We think that that's a really great thing, partnering with someone like Revolution Foods. So it's the sky's the limit.
Well, I'm excited to follow the progress of Biddy Foods and the work that you're doing. And I think it's really inspiring and tasty. And I think it's great that it has advantages for health and the environment. So I think this is probably a good transition point to go sort of into our signature round of asking some rapid fire fill in the blank questions, if you're okay with that.
Yeah.
All right, good. So I've got 5 for you here. The first one being, the best piece of advice I ever received was?
You can keep going long after you think you can't, which I think applies not only to running, which is the context in which I was given that piece of advice, but also with building a company. You're going to hear no a lot, but you just have to keep going.
Yeah. Did you hit a lot of points during your journey of Biddy Foods where there was a lot of challenges and hiccups and potential points of no return in your mind?
Oh, I think it was the same during Rock Health, right? I think anytime you're starting something that's new or novel or doesn't yet exist, I think you absolutely hear no, and you just have to choose to keep going, because that's the only way anything good happens, especially when it's new and unfamiliar.
Yeah, that's a great lesson, great piece of advice. All right, next question for you, or fill in the blank. I am most curious about...
I am really into the microbiome right now. So I think that we're going to see, there are a lot of, there aren't a lot, but there are several companies that are, working in that space. And I'm really excited to see the research coming out, because I think it's, kind of like telomere measurement. It's a really great real-time measurement of your overall health. And obviously I have a, pretty vested interest in gut health, being someone who, has issues in that area. So really interested to see what the ubiomes of the world and other folks have up their sleeves.
That's great. Yeah, I do too. All right, next one. If you had to write an autobiography, of course, about yourself, the title of the book would be?
Oh man, this is a hard one. I feel like everything probably good that I've ever done professionally is a result of just saying, okay, well, why not? So maybe the title would be Why Not? Because I think that's exactly how I responded to Megan with Biddy, early on in Rock Health. It's like, well, someone has to do it. Why not us? So I think that's probably, I'm a pretty curious person, but I'm also, my risk tolerance is pretty high. So I think you just have to try it. And if it works out, then great. So yeah, why not?
Yeah, I think that fits you very well. Good one. All right. If you could invite, I've got two more for you. If you can invite 3 people over for dinner, dead or alive, who would you invite and what would you talk about?
Well, I have 2 for sure. And I'm trying to think of who would really complement the two of them. I'm a pretty big history buff. And my personal hero is Teddy Roosevelt, for sure. I think, he's a terrifying human, but, did so many amazing things for this country and the National Park Service and preservation of land and really, what a curious and fascinating mind. I'm also a big fan of Winston Churchill. So I'm not sure who the perfect complement to the two of them would be. I watched the Super Bowl last night. And I think Lady Gaga is a pretty fascinating human being, probably very talented musician. Maybe throw Lady Gaga in there. I don't know. She would be a pretty good one. I'd like to see what she and TR do together.
Yeah, and that was a great game last night too, wasn't it?
Oh, it sure was. It was a crazy game.
Yeah, one of the best I've ever seen. So, and I won't try to take sides on this podcast here, but last question for you. So on this podcast, we like to celebrate what makes us unique, what makes us different. We call that unusual. So in your words, how would you fill in the following blank? I'm unusual because...
Well, I hate to state the obvious, but, I'm a woman suggesting all of us eat insects. And I think that is something that I have been told is quite unusual. So I'll stick with that.
Yeah, and I'm pretty certain that no one else is going to be repeating that one. So I think you can own that. You can own that territory there. So that wraps up all of my questions and fill in the blanks. It was a great conversation. So nice talking to you, Leslie. This is not an everyday conversation for me, so certainly unusual from my standpoint. I know you gave your biddyfoods.com website. You talked about Amazon. If there was any other place, location, social media that you would direct people to go to learn more, maybe about what you're doing, places to get your stuff that you haven't already mentioned, could you share any of those?
No, I think that really pretty much covers it. And I think you're going to put up a code for everybody. Everyone who wants to have their first experience with crickets, we have a nice discount code on the site for you first-time triers. Yeah,
I will share that across, of course, with all of our listeners on this podcast. So looking forward to doing that. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, great to have you on the show. And until I see you next time, thank you.
Thanks.
Hi again. It's me, Dr. G. If you are still listening, I'm hoping it's because you enjoyed this podcast. If you would like to hear future episodes, you could really help me out by subscribing to the That's Unusual podcast on iTunes and leaving a review. It goes a long way in helping me get the word out from avid listeners like you. As a thank you, I will be selecting one new reviewer each week at random for a free private 15-minute phone conversation where you can ask me anything and get professional advice on your career or business to help you stand out and make a difference. Also, if you want to be notified of any future episodes, please visit that'sunusualpodcast.com and sign up to receive updates on new episode releases. Until next time, remember to always think unusual.